Welcome everyone to our September Jersey Friendly Yard by Design webinar series. Tonight's webinar is Soil, Water, and Light Tips for a Successful Garden Design presented by Becky Laboy. We have one coming up in October too. We're on a Halloween theme. Spiders, they can be your friends. And the presenter of that will be Sabrina Turpak. So please visit our website if you want to register for that one. That's coming up in October. Before we start, I just want to introduce members of our Jersey Friendly Yards team. I'm Karen Walzer. I'm with Barnegat Bay Partnership, and we manage the website, but we also have Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Ocean County, Sue Servideo, she's the horticulturalist there, and Becky Laboy from the Ocean County Soil Conservation District. And both of those organizations, we work together as a team, promoting and expanding on the Jersey Friendly Yards website. I just want to do a quick introduction for our speaker tonight. Becky is the Education Outreach Specialist with the Ocean County Soil Conservation District. She's had over 20 years of experience as a formal classroom teacher and informal environmental educator. She is also the co-leader of the Jersey Shore chapter of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. She's an avid birder and enjoys landscaping her own Jersey-friendly yard. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. Good to see you tonight. Hello, Sue. Good to see you too. And hello, everyone out there. Thank you so much for joining me tonight for my program called Soil, Water, and Light, Tips for a Successful Garden Design. I'm going to go ahead and get started. As Karen stated, I'm the Education Outreach Specialist for the Ocean County Soil Conservation District. And our education program is designed to bring awareness to the importance of natural resources and their conservation, and to promote environmental stewardship. On behalf of the district, I offer a variety of educational programs that hopefully inspire others to make small yet important changes in their own landscaping practices that protect and enhance soil, conserve water, and rebuild our backyard ecosystems that reflect the native landscape so that we enhance plants, animals, wildlife habitat, conserve water, and have a healthy ecosystem and a healthy community overall. So the district is a proud partner in the Jersey Friendly Yards Initiative, as Karen said, spearheaded by the Barnegat Bay Partnership and in collaboration with the Rutgers Cooperative Extension. So whoever is watching today, we invite you to join us in our efforts to create a healthy community by creating a Jersey Friendly yard. So designing a successful Jersey-friendly yard begins with an understanding of the basic elements that support plant growth. And those elements are soil, water, and light. When choosing your plants, it's important to learn their nativity, so where they are from in the world, and understand their native climate and growing conditions, including soil, water, and light. And get to know your own microclimate and growing conditions in your own yard, including your soil's chemical, physical, and biological properties, your soil's moisture content, the water in your soil, and the varied amounts of sunlight that your yard receives throughout the day. And this information will help guide you in appropriate plant species selection and placement. So before I dig into soil and water and light and specific plant species, I'm going to first share with you some of the inspiring Jersey-friendly yards that our team has helped to plan and install. And this photo showcases the Jersey-friendly garden at the Ocean County Soil Conservation District office in Forked River, Ocean County. It features lots of native flowering perennials, including what you can see here, blazing star and purple coneflower and coreopsis. And we have dry, sandy soil, and this garden receives full sun. And this beautiful yard belongs to one of our Jersey-friendly gardeners, Jill. A variety of flowering perennials line her picket fence bordering her property, including coreopsis, salvia, and coneflower. And all receive full sun throughout the day and thrive in her very dry, well-drained, sandy soil. And this is Lisa's Jersey-friendly garden, designed to capture rain pouring from that downspout before it runs down the dry, sandy slope of her front yard, causing erosion. And she is growing lots of different plants, including black chokeberry, American beautyberry, turtlehead, foxglove, beard tongue, and coneflower, all in the full sun of her front yard. And here is Barbara's Jersey-friendly yard. And some parts of her sandy yard receives full sun throughout the day, and some areas receive part sun, and she also has some shady areas in her yard, and I'll be talking more about what these different light conditions mean a little bit later on. And she has planted switchgrass and Christmas fern and eastern red cedar and boneset in her yard. And here's my front yard. I am slowly reducing my front lawn by planting a native garden around an old dead tree, which has been converted into a woodpecker condominium. And my soil is a sandy loam, and my front yard receives full sun, although many tall trees cast shadows throughout the day, which is an important component I'll talk about a little bit later. And my flowering perennials include things like Culver's root and early sunflowers and mountain mint. And if you're a regular attendee of our Jersey-friendly webinars, you may be familiar with Phyllis's Jersey-friendly yard, which features a variety of flowering perennials and ferns and shrubs and vines and grasses and trees. And we are going to be exploring the nuances of soil, water, and light conditions in Phyllis's sandy, very sunny yard, sunny front yard, and partly shady and shady backyard. So we're going to explore her yard throughout the program. So these gardens were all designed with the help of the information and resources and tools on the Jersey-friendly Yards website, which I'm going to introduce to you. And we're going to take a quick ride through the Jersey-friendly Yards website. Okay, so here's the Jersey-friendly Yards website. It's www.jerseyyards.org. You're certainly welcome to Google that right now and come enjoy this ride with me. It'll be brief. I just wanted to introduce you to the website and specifically share with you the Jersey-friendly plants database, which is what I'm going to be referring to a lot during this program. So it's under the Jersey-friendly plants tab, and the Jersey-friendly plant database is first in our menu here. And once you get to the Jersey-friendly plant database, you can register, or if you're already registered, sign in, and this will allow you to save your plant list. So as you're choosing your plants, you can actually click on a plant, the wheelbarrow of a plant that you like, and if you are registered or when you're signed in, that will actually turn orange, and then it will become part of your list. And then you can print out your list and take that with you to the nursery. So I'm going to review a couple of these features later in our program. So I just wanted to give you some context. We have a select a region filter in this database where you can choose where you live in New Jersey to narrow your choices of plants that are most appropriate for your particular region. You can choose plant type, perennials, annuals, grasses, ground cover, shrubs, trees, vines. You can choose native plants only, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what exactly that means, native plants only, a little bit later. It means just that, native plants, but native to where? What do we mean by that? And light requirements, we're going to be talking about that today. So either full sun, partial shade, or some folks call it partial sun, or shade, and soil type, either clay, loam, organic, or sandy. We'll talk a little bit about pH, whether you have acid soil or alkaline soil or somewhere in between. And then when we talk about water, we're referring to soil moisture, the water inside the soil that's available to your plant, whether it's dry, moist, or wet. So that's a little bit about this Jersey Friendly Plant Database. There's other information for you to explore on your own, in particular, the 8 steps to a Jersey Friendly yard and the interactive yard are important tools and resources for you to use to help select plants and to design and plan your garden. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. So Jersey Friendly yards come in all different shapes and sizes. And of course, they have a combination of soil, water, and light conditions unique to each specific yard. So what exactly is a Jersey Friendly yard? What makes these particular yards and gardens that I just featured, what makes them Jersey friendly? So a Jersey Friendly yard starts with healthy soil, and I'm representing the soil district, so of course that's the most important component of your yard, but it truly is. So it starts with healthy soil that supports a variety of different kinds of plants, including annuals and flowering perennials and all the ones that we just named that are growing in everyone's yards, the ferns and the vines, shrubs, trees, grasses. They all have a mixture of heights, a variety of textures, colors, and these plants, they all provide wildlife with food, shelter, nesting materials, nesting places, so places to raise young, places to hide, places to find shelter from predators or to find shade. They don't require extraneous inputs such as chemical pesticides and herbicides or even extraneous manufactured fertilizers, or they don't require copious amounts of water. So a Jersey Friendly yard reflects the local natural ecosystems within our diverse physiographic provinces, including the coastal plain, the Piedmont, the highlands, and the ridge and valley. And Jersey Friendly yards prioritize the use of native plants. If you've heard of Dr. Doug Tallamy, entomologist with the University of Delaware, then you probably already know he has done extensive scientific research on the relationship between native plants and insects, and he has determined that a yard should be planted with at least 70% native plants in order to reflect and support a healthy ecosystem. His work also applies to the effects of other organisms who depend on these insects to survive. Researching the effects of non-native landscapes and bird populations in residential landscapes, Dr. Tallamy and his graduate student, now Dr. Desiree Naranga, along with Peter Mara, director of the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, they concluded from their research that because non-native plants lack an evolutionary history with native animals, non-native plants support ecosystems that are less abundant and less diverse in arthropod populations, which changes food availability for songbirds because songbird nestlings depend on this protein as food before they fledge. So their research concluded that residential yards dominated by non-natives lead to lower reproductive success compared with yards with greater than 70% native plant biomass or native plants. So properties that are landscaped with non-native plants function as what's called a population sink for our common backyard birds, including these robins and chickadees and nuthatches and so many more of our songbirds. So to promote sustainable food webs, urban planners and private landowners like us, we should prioritize native plant species. So Dr. Talamy, Dr. Narango, and Mr. Marr's research was published in the PNAS, the Proceedings of the National Academy of the Sciences of the United States of America. So let's identify and discuss the definition of native. What do we mean by native? So regarding the Americas, a native plant is considered to have occurred here prior to European colonization. Because of the long evolutionary relationship a native plant has formed with its native environment, which took hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, even millions of years, the native plant is adapted to local conditions, including local soil and climate, and can typically withstand natural disturbances that may occur, including drought and flooding, as well as fire disturbances and hurricanes. And native plants have natural defenses to native diseases and pests, also due to its co-evolutionary relationship with other organisms, such as native viruses and fungi and insects. And you are most likely aware of the leaves of a milkweed are a common food source for monarch butterfly caterpillars. The leaves and stems have a milky sap which contains cardiac glycosides, and these chemicals are toxic and they deter most insects from eating the plant. But monarch caterpillars are milkweed specialists. They actually specialize in eating this toxic milkweed, and their bodies have adapted to the toxins and can process them without being harmed. And in fact, the cardiac glycosides ingested by the caterpillars provide them with a superpower. It makes them and the adult butterflies toxic to birds and other predators. And this is a great advantage, of course. So this adaptation took hundreds of thousands of years, possibly millions of years, and is a very effective support for monarch populations in natural ecosystems. However, the specialist is not equipped to feed on any other plants besides milkweed, and so without it, individuals will die and populations of monarch butterflies will decrease. So our non-native backyards could result in the extinction of monarch butterflies and many, many other species. So gardeners often ask about a plant's tolerance to deer browse. We're just talking about insect browse. So what's a plant's tolerance to deer browse? So again, plants engage in chemical warfare called allelopathy, where they produce chemicals that deter browsers and prevent themselves from being eaten. And plants in the mint family, such as Pycnanthemum muticum, are undesirable to a deer's palate because of the chemicals found in the leaves and stems. However, the flowers produce copious amounts of nectar, as most mints do, and they're quite attractive to pollinators. So this is a pollinator magnet. And therefore, the native plants support pollinators and wildlife and biodiversity. And so native plants are therefore essential to the health and well-being of humans. So what is a non-native plant? Non-native plants have been introduced by humans from other regions. So what do I mean by other regions? And that definition is under debate, a hot topic among native plant enthusiasts. So let's take a look at this definition in the context of our beautiful state of New Jersey. So to New Jersey's east, we have the Atlantic Ocean, right? As well as if you're up north, the Raritan Bay and the Hudson River. And to the south is the Delaware Bay, and the west is the Delaware River. And to the north, there is a straight line drawn by humans delineating the border between New Jersey and New York. So this area is known to us as New Jersey, but plants, they don't pay attention, right? They don't pay attention to those human-made boundaries. They don't know New Jersey from New York. They do, however, respond to soil, climate, moisture, sunlight, and the environment as a whole, including other organisms. So the map to the right is a map of New Jersey showing its geologic features. South Jersey is called the coastal plain and consists of relatively new sandy soil, and North Jersey consists of very old rock formations. So this is the parent material of soil. And I want to give you an example to illustrate what I mean by region. What's a region to a native plant? So here is an example of a plant that is what we call native to New Jersey as described by these political boundaries. And this beautiful ground cover, definitely one of my favorites, is called St. Andrew's Cross, Hypericum hypericoides. And it tolerates dry soil and full sun and part sun. And its small four-petaled cross-shaped flowers bloom in July through August. And its natural range is the southeastern United States. The dark green color indicates the political boundaries of states where wild populations are native. And the lime green color indicates the specific counties where it is native. Again, political boundaries, but kind of narrows down where those wild populations are. And its native range, you can see, reaches all the way north to the middle of New Jersey. So wild populations did not cross over from our Central Plain into the Piedmont Highlands and Ridge and Valley regions. So if you live in northern New Jersey, would you include St. Andrew's Cross in your garden? Because it is technically a native to New Jersey based on our political boundaries. So that is a hypothetical question for you to ponder. So the Jersey-friendly plant database that I just introduced to you, it includes over 400 plants, about 300 of which are native to New Jersey. And our definition of native to New Jersey includes plants that have wild populations occurring somewhere in our state. So our definition is based on the political boundaries of the state. So St. Andrew's Cross is listed in our database, of course, as native to New Jersey. But we know that these different regions have different soils, different climates, different water, lots of different things going on. So big question to ponder. Our database contains many different search filters, as I introduced to you, that you can use to narrow your plant selection. And I showed you the select a region filter, which can be used to choose plants that are specific to your physiographic region where you live. So if you want to be even more specific than just native to New Jersey, you can click on Coastal Plain and St. Andrew's Cross will come up. If you click on Ridge and Valley, it will be excluded from your search. But if you just leave that blank, you're going to get all plants that are quote unquote native to the political boundaries of New Jersey. So let's see. The Jersey-friendly plant database also includes some plants that are non-native. And you're probably wondering, what are these other non-natives and why do we include them in our database? And one example is purple coneflower, a very common plant. It's commonly thought to be native to New Jersey, but its native range is actually the Midwest, so it's a prairie plant. It is easy to grow, it has high drought tolerance, and so it offers gardeners, New Jersey gardeners, the opportunity to practice water conservation in the garden. And it supports local pollinators with nectar and pollen and offers seed to birds. So it provides very important ecological services. And as a bonus, it's really pretty for humans to look at and enjoy. So we consider this plant, along with all of our New Jersey natives, to be Jersey friendly. But if you prefer to stick with just natives based on political boundaries of our state, as I showed you earlier, our database offers you the option to select native only so that you can comfortably plant only plants that are native to New Jersey if that is what you choose. So this is a crocus, a plant I'm sure we're all familiar with. So crocuses come from Southern Europe and the Mediterranean, and crocuses are also friendly. They play nice in the garden. They do not outcompete other plants for resources, such as water or light. And they are labeled in our database as not native to New Jersey, just as the purple coneflower is not native to New Jersey. However, there are plants that are non-native and not friendly, and those are considered invasive species. So let's talk about non-native plants that are also categorized as invasive. There's Callery pear, butterfly bush is not pictured here, but I do see it in folks' yards. Burning bush, Japanese barberry, purple loosestrife, all invasive species. So an invasive species is a non-native plant whose introduction to a different region causes or is likely to cause harm to the environment, number one, and the economy, number two. So invasive species outcompete other plants for those important resources, nutrients in the soil and water and light, and they take over the land and the space, and they choke out and strangle other plants. And because they did not evolve in the new landscape, they don't have an evolutionary relationship over hundreds of thousands or millions of years with other organisms or other plants. Many of them provide very little, if any, ecological value to caterpillars, say, or birds or other insects. So that in turn will affect nestling birds who need caterpillars, arthropods, to survive and fledge, and they basically wreak havoc on the entire food web. And although some invasives, you could argue, do provide food resources such as berries, Japanese barberry are widely eaten by birds, but the seeds are then spread far and wide. They might not be spread in our lawn or our yard because we probably mow them down and don't see them, but they do get spread. And unfortunately, they are overwhelming our natural landscapes, our New Jersey forests and woodlands, meadows, grasslands, fields. So they're literally changing our beautiful natural ecosystems. So they are a detriment to the ecological integrity of our planet. Jersey Friendly Yards encourages gardeners not to plant invasive species and to actually eliminate any invasive species you may have growing in your yard. There are a few culprits in our database. So if you're curious about the status of a plant, if you're not sure if it's invasive, you can type the name of the plant into the Find a Specific Plant filter at the top of the plant database and find out. Search for Callery pear will reveal that this plant is invasive, and do not plant it. And if you click on the name, you'll get to a page where we normally would describe any native or Jersey friendly plants. And in this case, you're going to instead find some suggestions for natives that you can plant instead. of the invasive. So let's dig in now to the importance of understanding all those important resources like soil and water and light as they pertain to the planning and design of a successful Jersey-friendly yard. So I want to premise this, so I'm managing expectations that my program is not about, I'm not going to be showing you kind of like architectural sketches of how to design your garden. I'm going to be offering you information and tips on how to look at specific plant species or generally how to look at plant species based on the conditions in your yard, those important abiotic conditions like soil, water, and light, and how to plan accordingly based on those specific conditions in your yard. So here's another photo of Phyllis's Jersey-friendly yard. I'm going to feature her garden, her yard today, because it's really become a model Jersey-friendly yard since she joined our Jersey-friendly program many years ago. So here it is looking straight on from the front. So Phyllis did not always have a front yard garden, and not unlike so many homes, her front yard was once lawn. In 2018, she participated in a Jersey Friendly Yards pilot program where she and 9 other homeowners, they're kind of our guinea pigs for the Jersey Friendly Yards program, they were offered several trainings where they learned about the Jersey Friendly Yards Initiative for Healthy Landscapes, and she learned about the Jersey Friendly Yards website, so extensive trainings on the website, and all the information and resources available on it, which I hope everyone out there tonight will take a look and take a deep dive into our website. And each participant had a site visit. So I had the great opportunity to go to all 10 yards where we discussed options for their yards based on the soil, water, and light conditions. And they were provided with a free soil test through Rutgers Soil Testing Laboratory. And to get our new Jersey Friendly Gardeners started, each were provided with $150 worth of plants that they selected for their home landscape based on soil, water, and light conditions using the Jersey Friendly Plant Database. And Phyllis wanted to turn her lawn into an oasis for pollinators. And as we saw, she is very successful. So less lawn means less mowing and less fertilizer, less water consumption, and spending more time enjoying a beautiful garden. And Phyllis is here tonight, and I'm sure she can attest to the fact that she is truly enjoying her beautiful garden. So first we looked at the pathway that the sun takes as it rises and sets over her yard from east to west. Probably something we do all the time in our yards, really. But I want you to kind of think about it tomorrow morning when the sun comes up, on how it's going to affect the plants in your yard. So Phyllis and I, we noted any obstacles that shaded or blocked the light of the sun and what time of day the shadow was cast and for how long. This particular photo was taken in the winter months when the sun crosses pretty low over the sky. And in the winter, when the sun is crossing low, she has 2 large pine trees across the street from her house. And they throw some dappled shade on the lawn for about an hour in the morning. But in the summer, the sun is high in the sky as it crosses over Phyllis's front yard, and the shadow does not reach the lawn. So her front lawn actually gets full sun all day long, full direct sun all day long. So what does full sun mean? Well, full sun is at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. Partial sun, also called partial shade, the Jersey Friendly Yards website uses the term part shade, is 3 to 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. And full shade is less than 3 hours of direct sunlight a day. And this may seem straightforward because we humans like things, black and white and put them in boxes. But there's actually a lot of nuances in sun and shade patterns. So what is the significance of light to plants? Unlike animals who are dependent on plants as food, plants are autotrophs and they actually produce their own food energy through photosynthesis. Quite amazing. The presence of chlorophyll in green plants allows them to synthesize sugars from sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, which then produces a byproduct of oxygen. Lucky for us. Or maybe because they produce oxygen, we are evolutionarily dependent upon it because that's what was available. So sunlight affects the ability of plants to flower, which is of utmost importance to plants because it is how they reproduce with genetic variation. And although many plants may survive with inadequate amounts of sunlight, less than ideal light conditions may prevent them from flowering and thus sexually reproducing. So each plant species has a set of environmental conditions within which it can best survive and reproduce. And not surprisingly, those conditions are the ones for which it is best adapted. So many different factors influence where species live, including temperature and soil chemistry and sunlight and water. And we are going to focus on the three: soil, water, and light, as they pertain to the success of our garden. Some plants grow in places where there are long periods of direct, intense sunlight, like Phyllis's front yard. This prickly pear cactus, for example, Opuntia humifusa, New Jersey's only native cactus. I'm always happily surprised that New Jersey has a native cactus, but it thrives in full sun. And the sunnier the location, the more blooms. And as we know, flowers are an important food source for pollinators. This is a pollinator magnet. And Phyllis has a nice patch of prickly pear cactus growing near her mailbox. So appropriately planted in her sandy soil, dry, sandy soil, full sun. It has flat, fleshy, oval pads that are actually evergreen. And in the growing season, the pads stand upright. In winter, they actually become a little bit desiccated and shriveled, and they kind of fall down flat on the ground. But they plump back up again in the spring. They're quite adapted to our climate. And not only do they tolerate the intense heat and light in the summer, but their pads are actually hardy enough to withstand our plowed piles of snow and our de-icing salts in the winter. Different plants have adapted to a range of light, what we call intensity, quality, and quantity. And some plants need less light than others. And adaptations in the plant's chloroplasts, which are the light gathering organs for photosynthesis, make it possible for some plants to reduce carbon dioxide to make sugars under low light conditions. And native mayapple prefers partial to full shade and commonly grows as a ground cover in woodlands. And its flower blooms under the shade of the large leaves, and it's such a pretty flower. And then that fruit will continue to develop and grow into a little golf ball size almost fruit. Another favorite is wood poppy. And wood poppy is also called celandine poppy. It prefers part to full shade. It blooms in early spring, and once the flowers are done, the foliage will continue to offer lush green texture in your garden. However, if the plant receives too much sun in the summer, the leaves will brown and wither. So making sure your wood poppy has enough sun, partial sun, but not too much sun, will keep it nice and lush. And then another example of a shade-loving plant or partial shade-loving plant is native bleeding heart, Dicentra eximia. It prefers partial shade. It does tolerate some heavier shade. It blooms in spring, and small heart-shaped pink flowers dangle from the stalks that grow just above those deeply cut frilly foliage. Really pretty leaves. And ferns tolerate the deep shade. So Christmas ferns, they grow in clumps, and those really beautiful emerging fiddleheads, they're a silvery color in the spring, and then dark green leafy fronds offer texture and shape in the shadiest spots of your yard. So lots of variation in sun, and plants are adapted to those different conditions. So in addition to light, soil is an important factor to consider when planning your garden and selecting plants. And it's probably, I would say, the most overlooked component, even though it's right there under our feet. Gardeners think of light and they think of water, but plant labels do not often describe the best soil conditions for the plant. Might say your garden plant label might say full sun, dry, or medium moisture. Put a couple of little water droplets showing you how much water to give your plant or to make sure your plant has, but they don't usually have any labels for soil. What kind of soil your plant should be growing in. So soil is where your plants will spend their entire lives. It's where they will find their nutrients, and it's where they're going to gather their water, and it's where they form relationships with soil organisms and even connect and form relationships with other plants through their root systems. And their world is underground. So it's a good idea to get to know your soil. And Phyllis collected a sample of her soil and sent it to Rutgers Soil Testing Lab to determine the soil texture and the pH and the nutrient content. And you can watch a short video about how to collect a soil sample. It's actually fun. On the Jersey Friendly Yards website on the Start with Healthy Soil page. And there's actually instructions, the worksheet that you'll fill out, and the directions for mailing your soil sample to Rutgers Soil Testing Lab are all found on this page. So soil texture is a physical property of soil that describes the mixture of soil particle sizes. So that's what soil texture is. It's talking about the soil size. And soil particle sizes are categorized as sand, silt, and clay. And sand particles are the largest. You can roll one grain between your fingers. They measure between 2 millimeters and 0.05 millimeters, followed by silt, a little bit smaller, measuring between 0.05 millimeters and 0.002 millimeters. And then clay particles are the smallest, measuring less than 0.002 millimeters. And both silt and clay particles are invisible to the naked eye, unlike that sand grain that you can see and feel. So why does soil texture matter? The size of the soil particle relates to its surface area, and the surface area affects the size of the pore spaces between individual particles. So clay has tremendous surface area compared to sand. And clay has smaller pore spaces between particles, but many more pore spaces in total. So nutrients attach to the small surface area of clay, preventing the nutrients from leaching out. But sand particles are too big to hold on to nutrients, and those nutrients easily leach out of a sandy soil. Leach out meaning percolate down into the soil out of reach of roots. Sand, silt, and clay particles combine with one another along with organic matter to form clusters called aggregates. And soil aggregates are groups of soil particles that bind to each other more strongly than to other particles or adjacent particles. And the space between the aggregates provide different sized pore spaces for retention and exchange of air and water. And the way in which aggregates are arranged is referred to as soil structure. So aggregation affects erosion, movement of water, and plant root growth. Desirable aggregates are stable against rainfall and water movement, and aggregates that break down in water or fall apart when they're struck by raindrops, they release individual soil particles, resulting in erosion. And this can actually seal the soil surface and clog pores, and this breakdown creates crusts that close pores and other pathways for water and air entry into the soil, and also restrict emergence of seedlings from a soil. So working the soil when it's wet further exacerbates the problem, creating compacted soil. This is actually a photo that one of our inspectors took from the Ocean County Soil Conservation District of soil in Ocean County on a development site that was obviously worked when it was wet, when heavy machinery was on site when the soil was wet. So optimum soil conditions have a very large range in pore size distribution. So this includes large pores between the aggregates and smaller pores within the aggregates. The pore space between aggregates is essential for water and air entry and exchange. The pore space provides zones of weakness through which plant roots can grow. Sandy soils have low aggregation, but roots and water can move readily through. Soil with some clay content helps form aggregates, but too much clay can restrict plant root growth. It was determined that Phyllis had a soil texture somewhere between sandy loam and loamy sand. I circled it here on this soil texture pyramid, meaning a high content of sand, approximately 80%, somewhere around there, with approximately 10% of each clay and silt particles sprinkled in, or a combination of 20% clay and silt making up the other 20%. So not unlike many of us here in South Jersey. The dominant texture is the second word in the phrase. So a loamy sand would be predominantly sand. The high sand content means the soil is not well aggregated. That can be remedied, though, by adding organic matter to the soil in the form of compost. The outer coastal plain where Phyllis lives, where South Jerseyans live, consists mostly of sand and silt with less clay than any other region in New Jersey, although there are pockets of clay in South Jersey. If you have clay soil, or if you have sandy soil and you are looking to improve your soil, adding organic matter to the soil in the form of compost is an excellent remedy. It does take time. Gardeners typically shoot for loam, which is a mixture of sand, silt, and clay in quantities that will equal somewhere in the middle, in that brown shape in the middle of the soil texture pyramid. However, depending on where you live in New Jersey, as I said, you likely have sandy or clay soil, and that is completely okay. The key is to select plants for your garden that are adapted to your specific soil conditions in your specific yard. And lucky for us, many plants can tolerate a wide range of soil textures, from loamy sand to sandy clay to clay loam. Many plants can also tolerate a wide range of light conditions and a wide range of water needs, which we refer to as the soil moisture conditions. And this together is called the range of tolerance. As gardeners, we always shoot for the optimum conditions for our plants. Range of tolerance can be depicted on a graph. And most range of tolerance graphs are bell-shaped, like this one, with the optimum range near the center of the bell. This graph shows range of tolerance of temperature. Stress on the plant occurs when the temperature gets too low on the left or gets too hot on the right, and slightly cooler than optimum still allows for a relatively healthy plant according to this particular graph, but slightly hotter than optimum is not acceptable for this particular plant, this particular species. It may be different for any other species. This is a generalization. So if you find that there is a plant in your garden that is not doing as well as you'd like, its soil, water, and or light conditions may be just less than optimum. So back to soil texture. Once you know the texture of your soil, check the box under soil type in the Jersey Friendly Yards database based on the dominant texture of your soil. You can choose clay or sandy, and unless you are planting in muck, you will probably not have a predominantly silty soil in New Jersey, so that's not a choice. If your soil has high organic matter content, such as decayed leaves in a woodland, you can select organic. And see all those question marks next to all the terms? You can click on any of those question marks and you'll be taken to a page with all the definitions of those terms. Many plants are tolerant of a variety of conditions regarding soil texture, including both sand and clay, but check the box that best defines the area in which you're gardening. Your soil texture will also affect your soil's ability to hold moisture. Water is the third component to consider, along with soil and light, when planting your garden. When we address your plant's water needs in the garden, we are referring to the moisture in the soil that is available to your plants. Available soil moisture is directly linked to soil texture. Just like larger soil particles do not hold nutrients, they just cannot chemically bond with the nutrients, they also do not bond with the water molecules. So water percolates quickly through sandy soil, but it can be bound up in clayey soil. Sandy soil is typically considered dry or well-drained, meaning the water will percolate through quickly and water does not remain on the ground after a rain event. The more silt clay or organic matter your soil contains, the capacity for it to hold moisture increases. A moist or medium drained soil is moist or damp to the touch and occasionally saturated after a rain event. Moist soils remain wet within the rooting depth, and wet soil is saturated much of the time and water can remain on the surface for long periods. It's also important to note that not only can texture affect soil moisture, but there's myriad other things that can affect soil moisture as well, including a clay lens, high water table, compacted soil are three that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. So let's talk about soil pH. Soil pH is a chemical property of soil. Soil pH is a measurement of the acidity or alkalinity of the soil. The soil pH, as it decreases and becomes more acidic, the number of hydrogen ions in the soil increases. And the results of Phyllis's pH test was 6.87, which is considered, quote unquote, very slightly acidic, and at the upper range of the optimum pH for many garden plants, as indicated by that green bar. Soil pH is important because it actually affects the availability of nutrients to the plants and the activity of soil microorganisms that are beneficial to the plants. So chemically speaking, nutrient molecules are affected in a way that either gives the nutrients a free pass into the roots of the plant or puts up a wall to the nutrients entry. This graph shows the pH scale from 4 to 10, with 7 neutral in the middle. Recall Phyllis had very slightly acidic soil, labeled at the top of the graph just left of center. The green areas of each of the nutrients listed indicate that they are available to plants along that particular spectrum of pH. In very slightly acid soil, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the three macronutrients plants need, are all adequately available, as are sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. Our native New Jersey plants are adapted to very slightly and even medium acid soils and even strongly acid soils. So native acid-loving plants include rhododendrons and azaleas, mountain laurel, juniper, pine, spruce, and some oak species as well. And this chart shows the importance of different nutrients to the growth of plants. Plants need NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the macronutrients sold as fertilizers. Nitrogen is important for vegetative growth, including roots, stems, and leaves. The phosphorus supports flowers, fruits, and seeds. Potassium facilitates water uptake and supports resistance to pests and disease. And the macronutrient levels of potassium, phosphorus, and calcium in Phyllis's soil were below optimum, so they weren't at the tip of that bell, if this were a graph, but not excruciatingly low. So she decided to test the range of tolerance of her plants, and because she was focusing on native plants that thrive in dry, nutrient-poor soils, she opted to rely on organic matter inputs through the addition of compost rather than adding chemical fertilizers. But know that the compost does not add nutrients directly, rather it feeds the soil biology, the tiny organisms living in the soil, which then process the organic matter and basically excrete nutrients. And this takes time. But adding organic matter to your soil will increase its fertility over time, as well as increase its moisture holding capacity and buffer the pH. So Phyllis not only established beds in her front yard, but she created a large bed that wound around to the north side of her yard, the right side there, which is largely shaded by tall trees that line a really pretty stream bank below. Where her pathway rounds the corner, she has various amounts of sunlight, ranging from full sun to full shade, with pockets of partial shade, and various amounts of light and shade also affect the soil moisture. Soil that is subject to full sun for more than 6 hours a day will lose more moisture to evaporation than soil in part shade. So let's take a look at how Phyllis designed her garden by selecting plants that were appropriate for these varied conditions. So here's Phyllis hugging her favorite plant, Monarda fistulosa, commonly called wild bergamot. And wild bergamot is in the mint family, and it's well suited for a variety of soil conditions, including sand, clay, and loam. So even if you're not living in South Jersey like we are, this is an excellent plant for you if you have just about any type of soil, sand, clay, and loam. It tolerates both dry and moist conditions and thrives in full sun, but does well in part shade too. Phyllis is using these large perennials as a nice pollinator-friendly hedgerow in the front of her house. They are very attractive to native bees of all shapes and sizes, as well as numerous other pollinators and hummingbirds. And they bloom throughout the summer from late June through July and August. And visiting Phyllis's garden this summer, I had the pleasure of listening to all the bees buzzing around her wild bergamot. And mixed in with the wild bergamot, Phyllis planted Virginia mountain mint and purple coneflower, two more flowering perennials that thrive in dry or moist, sandy, clay, or loamy soil, in full sun or part shade. And here you can see black-eyed Susans are in bloom. To the left is seaside goldenrod, not blooming yet when I took this picture. And to the right is common evening primrose, also not blooming just yet. And back by the coneflower, you can see blooming back there, and more wild bergamot. She has a 9-bark shrub that flowered in early summer and is forming berries for the birds. And in the front, lining the street, she has irises. And all of these full sun loving plants are tolerant of a variety of light conditions and soil texture types, and tolerate dry or moist soils. And tucked between and among all these tall plants, relatively tall plants, are some smaller plants that are receiving part shade, including St. Andrew's Cross. And this is the same specimen I showed you earlier when I was featuring a plant whose native range reaches only as far north as South Jersey. It was growing in full sun when Phyllis first planted it, but now it's growing among other plants in a more mature garden, and it receives part shade, and it's absolutely thriving and super cute. The spiky blazing star, Liatris spicata, you can see with its spires of purple flowers, has prime real estate in full sun as we reach the northeast corner of Phyllis's property. And here we also get a better look at the 9-bark. And as we turn the corner and begin to head north behind the house, there's a large patch of common milkweed that's leaning towards the sun. It's just where the sun eventually crosses over the sky and crosses over Phyllis's house. And the milkweed are leaning towards it. And the flowers of the milkweed are magnets for bumblebees during the summer. And its leaves, as we talked about, are host to monarch caterpillars and other beneficial insects, such as this lacewing. You can see 2 tiny eggs were found on this milkweed seed pod. And across the path from the milkweed, above the stream that trickles past Phyllis's yard, she showcases the Helen's flower and the great blue lobelia. You can see how the The Helen's flower receives full sun, but the lobelia, some of it is in a little bit more sun, but much of it is in part shade. And this photo was taken about a month later in almost the same spot. And Helen's flower and lobelia are now in bloom. And the lobelia closest to the Helen's flower receives more hours of direct sunlight per day than the lobelia planted a little bit further north. But as you can see, this plant exhibits a wide range of tolerance to light conditions because it's doing well in both spots. And I wanted to share this. Tucked within the plants, Phyllis cleverly added some recycled garden decor. She has a broken pot and plate filled with marbles, and add water, and it's an instant watering trough for thirsty insects. And all of these items were rescued by Phyllis from the side of the road on trash day on their way to the landfill. Phyllis is very clever and very creative with reusing materials in her garden for both function and beauty. So walking further down the pathway on the north side of the house, the light is limited and the soil is able to hold a bit more moisture. Several species of ferns are growing, including Christmas fern in the right corner. And in the stump is ostrich fern. Phyllis has decided recently that the ostrich fern is not happy there. It's surviving, but it's not happy. It's not getting its optimum amount of shade or light. She feels this area does not provide enough shade, and she's going to move it to the other side of the path to a shadier location where there's another ostrich fern that is doing well. So here is another view of the ostrich fern in the stump, and you can see the shadow of the house just missed the location of the fern, so it's receiving too much light, and its companion is in the forefront of this photo where it's thriving. And here's a closer look at both plants. The ostrich fern is receiving part sun, has brown leaves, and is struggling, and the ostrich fern in full shade is doing really well. So just moving a plant slightly, a tiny amount of light made all the difference for this particular plant. So out from behind the shade of the house, there's more sunlight. Although this location receives 6 hours of sunlight a day, so it's considered full sun, there is the dappling effect of the trees. So the sun is much less intense here than in the front yard. So plants were selected for this location that tolerate a range of light from full to partial sun. Phlox is growing very happy and healthy in this location. And in this partly sunny, partly shady area, closer to the woods behind Phyllis's house, the soil is richer with organic matter. Rose mallow thrives in either sandy or loamy soil. It prefers full sun but tolerates part shade. It prefers well-drained to medium-drained moist soil, but tolerates well-drained dry soil as well, and I can attest to that. I have some in my dry, sandy yard. And wild ginger grows well in Phyllis's shady woodlands. The fallen leaves provide a natural mulch that keeps the soil nice and moist, just the way that wild ginger likes it. As does bloodroot. This native likes part to full shade with moist but well-drained organic soil. And the stunningly beautiful white flowers, which I do not have a picture of, so you'll have to get some bloodroot and plant it in your yard and watch them bloom in the spring. The flowers last only a short time. And the leaves, kind of mingled in with the bloodroot, are the leaves of summersweet. And summersweet is a shade-loving shrub found growing in dappled woodlands with moist, well-drained soil. and it's a nectar plant for butterflies, and it's attractive to a variety of beneficial insects and pollinators. And in my yard, I've pushed this plant to the edge of its range of tolerance and found that it can tolerate part sun and full shade. But it's important to keep in mind that there are many factors at work that support plant growth. Although a plant may have a wide range of tolerance for light conditions, it may be very picky about the soil moisture or the soil texture, and it may be tolerating the light ranges because the other conditions are optimum. So if a plant is subject to less than optimum conditions for more than one factor, it may or may not thrive. And that is the tricky part of being a gardener, is to figure out where your plants want to live in your yard. So this concludes our tour of Phyllis's Jersey-friendly yard. And in conclusion, when planning your garden, think carefully about the many conditions to which you are subjecting your plants, including the soil, water, and light. Is one factor more important to consider than another, you may ask? And that probably depends on the species. Often I'm asked why a plant is not doing well in a garden when all of the conditions are seemingly optimum. Well, I guess the plant doesn't think so. So try testing the soil, testing the amount of sunlight the plant receives in one day. If it's direct sunlight, dappled sunlight can make a big difference. Check the soil moisture, and also know that garden plants are grown from seed whose parent plants may have come from an area with slightly different conditions than your yard. So the seed may have a slightly different genotype, genetics, and thus is able to tolerate slightly different conditions, but also may not be able to tolerate slight differences in soil, water, and light. So gardening is not an exact science, but observing your own yard's micro ecosystem and observing your plant's response to it can help you grow a healthy and thriving Jersey-friendly yard. So thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the importance of soil, water, and light as important components to consider when planning your Jersey-friendly yard. I'm happy to stay and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Becky.
I was saying the same thing.
I know, sorry about that. I had
That's okay. It's okay.
We should do it as a chorus, right? Thank you.
No, I love the pictures and just the, knowing the different plants too. But there were a couple questions. I'm not sure, Karen, if you want to ask Becky some. I think we answered a couple of them, but I thought maybe there'd be things that I thought she might want to.
Yeah, I got a lot of
Oh, you might have gotten others.
Specific ones to the host, but let me go back and see. Someone did ask about soil testing. So she didn't say what county she's from, but do you still offer the an Ocean County Extension Office, the soil testing kits for sale?
We do. We have the soil testing kits for sale, which is $20, but you can do it online if that's easier for you. You download the form and send the check in with that. And we do a pH only. So if you just need to check your pH, we do that in-house. So we do that, and we just opened in August to be back in person with clients. So that's yay.
Yep, and
we get to see people.
And that's Ocean County, just to clarify. So you would have to check with, if you live in another county, check with your extension office before going over there, just to be sure they do sell the kits.
Yeah, not everybody is unfortunately able to be open fully for agricultural reasons, because some of them are vaccination sites. So it's their county offices, so it may vary. So definitely check. Okay,
we just got a last minute question here. Any plants that are more resistant to voles? That's a tough one. I don't know.
Yeah, that's funny. I was just listening to You Bet Your Garden. And they were talking about how moles and voles love bulbs because people are putting their bulbs in the ground now. More resistant to bulbs, probably something that doesn't have a bulbous root, that doesn't store all the starch and sugar in the roots and maybe stores it in another part of the plant. But off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I can't think of any plants that are resistant to moles. I bet any of those mint plants perhaps have, chemicals in their roots as well, or that might deter moles, or plants with those chemical toxins of any kind, like milkweeds, things like that. That is homework.
That's an interesting
Moles,
question.
yeah, moles and voles are tough, but your moles are definitely more your carnivores, and your voles are your herbivores.
Okay.
So the voles usually are the ones that are doing more of your damage to your plants directly by eating either the stems, possibly the bulbs, bulbs and seed. So that's sometimes where there can be more of an issue with those guys. But there's no plant that I know of specific. It's kind of like deer. That they'll eat anything if they can try it and see, and sometimes it can do some damage. But yeah, no problem. But we did have one person, we answered it in here, but what's your opinion on the, somebody was asking about the aggressive, no, some native plants can be aggressive spreaders, but they're not considered invasive. Or sorry, any unfriendly native plants to watch out for. That's the question. Poison ivy. But
yes, poison ivy is a good one. Yeah, I guess as far as it depends on how much you're willing to tolerate aggression in your garden from a native plant, how much space you have. If you have a small yard, you probably don't want to plant. Mints tend to be more aggressive. I love wingstem. Verbicina, I believe, is the genus. I'd have to Google the Jersey Friendly Yards plant database to find out the specific epithet as well. But wingstem, it's gorgeous. Pollinators love it. I got seed from Randy Eccles' Toadshade farm, and it has spread all over the place. I'm like, ah. So that is, one to watch out for. I am giving it to friends, but I, tell them beware, just so you know it spreads.
Yeah, I did point out that in the Jersey Friendly Yards plant database, if a native plant does have aggressive tendencies, that you'll find that information on the details page, so that you are forewarned. You might have a spot where you really do want it to spread, but you have to give it enough room. And if you don't want a spreading plant, then don't plant it in that area.
Yeah. And maybe there's a relationship between plants that might grow in a meadow, tend to spread out in full sun, versus, well, no, I was going to say versus ground covers. There's plenty of ground covers that spread out as well. So yeah, I guess it just, really depends on the plant species. But yeah, as Karen said, we discuss all that in the Jersey Friendly Yards database.
And seeds are the other ones, like the seeds can spread easily. So if you deadhead the plants a little earlier and take those seed pods off, because it depends on if the birds like them, but you may be able to help bring down some of that aggressiveness.
Yeah, knowing the nativity of the plant, where it grows naturally in an ecosystem might help to guide you in how it's going to behave in a garden setting.
Yeah, I think we kind of.
I think that's.
Yeah. Oh, blackberry. Somebody put in blackberry is thorny and aggressive spreader. And yes, it is.
Yeah.
But again, if you maintain, it's something that you wouldn't be considered a low maintenance in that particular, yes, it can survive and thrive in our area. Oh, sorry, Becky, this is your talk. It's something that you would have to cut out and maintain, maybe taking out some canes so it doesn't spread so aggressively, and keep it maintained versus just letting it do what it's going to do.
Yeah. You have to look at the details and descriptions of the plants, maybe even do some additional research and pick the plant that's right for you. Right plant, right place, which is well said by Phyllis. She responded to another comment. This one, maybe Becky, you want to add something too. Someone said, I often see gardens with plants that are overflowing, no space between plants. But in emulating this, my plants suffer disease like powdery mildew and insects like spider mites. What's your advice? And then Phyllis said, right plant, right place.
And my advice is don't plant that plant. And I know exactly how that feels to have plants in my yard with powdery mildew. I just cannot plant plants that are susceptible to powdery mildew because it's going to show up whether I space them 10 feet apart or space them really close together. The circulating air thing just doesn't work for me in powdery mildew. So I just don't plant. And that's, bee balm. All my favorite bee balms. Spotted horse mint seems to be doing well for me now. Anyway, we shall see what happens. But there's a Monarda bradburniana. It's a prairie Monarda. It's not a native to New Jersey Monarda, so depending on your preference. But Monarda bradburniana grows to maybe a foot, resistant to powdery mildew. So I grow that one in my yard.
I think also depending on, in some cases, if you have a property where you have a lot of water, in the sense of a sprinkler head system versus native, that also will put into play, or Mother Nature this past month especially, we're seeing that no matter what. So you're kind of some plants you just deal with it, you tolerate it to a point. It's your tolerance.
And sometimes they'll get that, but they'll come back next year. So it's if it bothers you, the look of it bothers you, then yeah, you might want to look for a different plant.
Good questions, though.
Yeah. That's all that I see. Do you see anything else, Sue? I think
I didn't have anything. I don't see anything else in particular that came through.
Okay. So anyway, thank you everyone who joined us. We appreciate it. And don't forget, we have another webinar coming up in October, all about spiders.
Yes.
Our friends, the spiders.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Right. Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Everyone, have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.